Welcome back to the history of TGX. This episode is a combination of these two History of TGX episodes, the History of TG Earth and the History of 1.16, mixed together as these two servers took place at the same time. If you've already seen both of these videos, this video won't have anything new that you haven't already seen outside of some extra editing and some things here and there, and a new way of seeing it now that both are together in chronological order. If you haven't seen either video or want to see them in chronological order, well, you're in luck. Welcome to the History of TGX. Today, we'll be talking about 1.16 and Earth. Before we talk about 1.16 though, I'd like to get everyone up to speed with the timeline of things. TGX, as I've mentioned before, is an acronym that means many things, but has a pretty deep history. The idea of an acronym to describe this community and its Minecraft servers started with the acronym TGN, standing for Teen Gaming Nights. It was named this way because the community was made up of teenagers, the teenagers in question game, and these teenagers game at night. TGN itself was a community of teenagers from r/teenagers who played video games at events that higher-ups in r/teenagers would organize and connect people in the community with. This would later create the Minecraft server whose lineage you all know and love. TGN also had a sister community on the r/teenagers Discord, commonly referred to as TeenServe, that was also a sub-community of r/teenagers, but they're not really relevant to this story, so we're going to be ignoring them for a majority of these videos. What's important to know with TeenServe is that most things are done administratively by admins, moderators, and all other higher-ups on both r/teenagers and TGN that pertain to the community are done through TeenServe. The first TGN Minecraft server was launched in 2014 on the Minecraft update 1.7. After several months, activity on the server would slow down, and the administrators reset the world and updated the game, giving players a new world to be in with new blocks, items, mobs, and biomes to be able to use. This resetting of the world and the updating of the game made every new iteration of the server after 1.7 dubbed a reset, and the name of the reset would be the name of the update the server updated to, giving 1.7 the name 1.7, as it was on 1.7, and later resets followed this same trend. The confirmed resets that I know of after 1.7 were 1.8 in 2016, 1.12.1 in 2017, 1.12.2 in 2018, 1.13 in 2019, and 1.14 that same year in 2019. Although history is incredibly poorly documented up until later in the story, meaning that we don't really know much about these resets outside of the word of mouth of players who played on these servers years after they existed. The history of TGN and of r/teenagers would diverge, however, in an event sometimes referred to as Modgate, due to reasons I will not be covering, but might in a later video if I ever cover TGN later in a full video. To keep things incredibly short, then community director of r/teenagers, Caro, believed that TGN had fostered a toxic community, and that the server's administrator, NSA, was too old to be running the server, along with other complaints she had with the admin. This led to a split in servers and the community, with TGN launching a new reset called 1.14, no longer associated with r/teenagers, and r/teenagers officially launching a new server more simply dubbed Teenagers Gaming, or TG for short, starting with the 1.14 reset that would later be redubbed to 1.15 as TG updated partway through the server's existence, with the name change helping differentiate it more from TGN's 1.14 server. With the split in servers, the community would split as well, with more committed TGN players staying with NSA and TGN, while other TGN players moved over to the more active and well-funded TG. TGN 1.14 would run throughout its entirety, but would shut down at the end of the reset. TG, run by ex-TGN moderator, now administrator of TG, Muzak23, on the other hand, would live longer than TGN, and after its 1.15 server lived its life and had an event called Anarchy, where the server had no rules for a short period of time leading to mass griefing and death, the server reset to 1.16, where our story begins on August 15th, 2020, the launch date of 1.16. Going from 1.15 to 1.16, Before we hop on the server, one major new change was the server hub, where players went when they logged into the server before going to the Minecraft server. This giant new area was styled around a garden, with players spawning in a large gazebo, with a giant koi pond behind them, a large leaf arch behind that, and humongous boxes that stretched 3 stories high in front of them that were filled with soil and had large flowers sprouting out of them. These boxes formed 3 branching pathways players could go down, but only one of them worked. The regular survival Minecraft server, which was located on the right. The main pathway led to a portal that was revealed to be meant for event servers, when the people who ran the server made new servers that were only intended to be played on for a short period of time before shutting down were located. The TG Valentine's Day event and the April Fool's server a few days after April Fool's were located here. The left pathway was empty, leading to a server that did not exist, possibly opening in the near future. In the middle of all these pathways was a giant statue of the r/teenager's female snoo mascot, who was almost as tall as all the boxes that surrounded her. In the top right corner was a giant tree that served as a parkour course that anyone could hop in and start jumping. This hub world was a massive change from the original, which was considerably smaller and didn't have much to it. Hopping into 1.16, players were greeted to a brand new spawn. Back in 1.15, the world was amplified, and the spawn represented that, with tall, jagged mountain cliffs that players would have to fall down hundreds of blocks to reach the ground. 1.16, on the other hand, had a spawn representative of the reversion back to a regular world type, being a mostly flat, mellow field full of small ruins that dotted the landscape. Players spawned in facing west, and to their west was a lawn path leading out of the 200 by 200 block invisible border that defined spawn, an area players could not build, destroy, interact, or take damage in. To the north was another one of these paths, but much more overgrown and harder to see, leading into a dense forest that was hard to navigate through. East was a small dock out to sea, but as players could not place boats at spawn, this dock was pretty useless, unless you teleport in with a boat already, something most players did not have the ability to do. Later, a parkour course that would change monthly was added to the eastern side, which was a fun area many players participated in, but also discouraged movement east from new players at the same time. South was a nether portal that, when the server launched, was closed, but upon defeating the Ender Dragon later in the day, was opened, leading to the Nether Hub, an area in the middle of the Nether where the Nether highways, massive ice roads that went straight out in every cardinal direction, converged at. These highways were a major part of transportation, where everyone used the highways to get from somewhere to anywhere in the overworld. As they were a major public location, shops, markets, and other public works projects were also almost entirely located along the Nether highways, immediately off the roads, but centered around the Nether Hub. This made the Nether Hub not only the server's hub for transportation, but also the center of commerce. Speaking of the Nether Hub, 1.16 also had a difference from 1.15, as while the 1.15 Nether Hub was built by players, the 1.16 Nether Hub was built before the server launched, by a player named Murdock Redocchi, a talented builder on the server who is well known for making some of TG's most well-known and admired structures, many of which we will get onto later in the video. The Nether highways also saw a small change this reset, as with the addition of the Soul Speed enchantment in 1.16, Soul Soil or sand was added to the side of the ice highways, with carpet being placed on top, allowing the negative effects of the Soul Sand to be ignored by all players, but the positive effects of the Soul Speed enchantment being gained by those who had it. These carpets also sported the colors of the highway's representative color, making it easier to tell what highway you were on from a quick glance, while also widening the highways by 2 blocks, making the highways feel much less cramped. The carpets also provided a barrier for boats to hit, so it was much easier to ride the highways in boats than before without snagging on blocks, open stores, or in rare cases, falling off the highway entirely. I would also like to mention that the highways were not built before the server launched, and were built by a large volunteer force who voluntarily built the highways in each direction, going out thousands of blocks. Anyway, those were all the major changes to the server going from 1.15 to 1.16. And now that that's out of the way, let's get into the actual history. Before 1.16 launched, 3 towns were already planned out to be founded on 1.16. All of them sequel towns to popular 1.15 towns. The leaders of each of these towns all came together and planned on making all of their towns nearby each other, 2,000 blocks west of spawn. These towns were Superiority, the successor to Curiosity on 1.15, led by Ninobf, Nowhere, the successor to No Name on 1.15, led by ABlazingEBoy, and Modville, the successor to Modville on 1.15, a long-standing town tradition made up almost entirely of the moderators of the server, led by Muzak23, the server's admin. On day 1 of the server's launch, the 3 towns would all be founded in close proximity to one another. Superiority would actually be founded a day later compared to the other 2 towns, but who's counting? Little did they know, but these 3 towns would become some of the first towns founded that would later be part of the massive server population cluster known as the Western Megalopolis. Far away from the 3-town cluster, another sequel 1.15 town would be founded thousands of blocks northeast of spawn called Spirit City, a sequel to the 1.15 town, Ghost Town, both founded and led by a player named Fun for the Whole Fam. A spiritual successor to Ghost Town was also made, down west a couple hundred blocks east of Nowhere, called Grogstown, founded by Submadoge. Hey, that's me. Novak, a town made by Sigma Turbine, was also founded on this date, near the west at -900, -900, chosen because she thought the coordinates would be easy to remember. Several other major towns would be founded on the first day of the server, most of them being located on the west axis of the world, just west of spawn. There are a few reasons why this happened. One reason is that players spawned in facing west, with a wide open path leading them further west, leading most new players who join the game to move on west. Another reason is a pathway that would later be dubbed the Western Overworld Highway was built by an unknown player, just outside of spawn that connected the wide open pathway on the western side of spawn further out, going as far as Nowhere on the first few days of the server, encouraging more western expansion. A third reason is that in the overworld, players had already started building structures, and other buildings near spawn on its western side, leading new players to believe that there are more people west, and more communities to visit and things to see. For more veteran players, or the occasional new player who visited the Nether Hub first before exploring the overworld, they would find that the Western Highway was the most popular highway in the Nether, leading players to some of the largest and most active towns on the server at the time, like Superiority and Nowhere, leading to even more western expansion. All of these reasons would culminate into the massive population supercenter later dubbed the Western Megalopolis. Many of these towns that would make up the Western Megalopolis were formed on the first day. We already discussed Superiority, Nowhere, Modville, Novak, and Grogstown, but a few more popped up either on the first day or a little whiles after, including Seatown, led by Banana Pirate and Silly Slimes, The Shire, a sequel to the 1.15 town The Valley, led by Alpha Master Jarn, Stalltown, a small town made by Aiden Swag, this kind of mess over here that could be Spawnstead, who might have been led by Jim Topher, but I'm not sure, or Tree Town, a town founded by Stone Canoe 60491, or neither of these towns since everything's just kind of bundled together so much. Oh, and the small town called India, Vietnam, led by... Wait a minute, where is it? Oh, right. India, Vietnam was a tiny town made around the edge of the Western Overworld Highway, the highway that all large towns formed near spawn were based out of, but was completely rolled back by moderator and owner of the town of Nowhere, ABlazingEBoy, as India, Vietnam was built within Nowhere's claimed borders. This caused a small controversy over the claiming system, as Nowhere's claim had extended for hundreds of blocks outside of the base city, and the claiming pillars Nowhere had created could have easily have been missed, while other players argued that Nowhere was completely within its right based on server rules to make an enforceable claim of that size. This argument can partially be seen in signs left where India-Vietnam once stood, with a particularly large response being left by Superiority Town leader Ninobf, but the majority of the unclaimed signs were destroyed over time. Moving away from towns for a moment, the recently formed Astral Group also began work on a large dome east of Spawn as a base for the group, a large megabase that would be the first for 1.16, the first of many that Astral would build in 1.16's lifetime. Speaking of megastructures, Murdock's Arch would begin construction on the first week of the server, a large megastructure of a giant stone arch covered in faces. However, as the build's designer, Murdock provided several different builders with 3 different schematics on purpose. The building was made incorrectly, with one pillar being made asymmetrical to the other. This setback would be one of many that stopped construction of the arch for months. And one thing I almost forgot to mention. It was actually very difficult to play on 1.16 for the first few days of the server, due to something known as the snaps. So many players were playing on the server that the server couldn't handle it, leading it to kicking out large portions of the player base every once in a while to help lower TPS. These would continue for the first few weeks of 1.16, but get less and less common before disappearing completely. Now that some of the locations have been filled out, let's get to one of the major events of day 1 of the server, the Dragon Egg Rush. The Dragon Egg Rush, or the Deg Rush for short, was a massive race where dozens of players raced to kill the Ender Dragon and collect the Dragon Egg first before anyone else. This is a common competition that happens at the start of every TGX server's launch. The 1.16 race, however, was mired in controversy, as one of the end portals that would lead players to the end was covered up by moderators, making it impossible for anyone who was led to that portal to enter the end. The Dragon Egg was later won by a team of moderators, which to some didn't sound to be a coincidence. There was some pushback to this, but the issue was never brought up, and Modville continued to own the egg, with the egg later being added to a shrine at a point between the towns of Superiority, Modville, and Nowhere. Months later, the egg would later be taken by a moderator and kept in an ender chest due to frequent griefs, until later, where the Dragon Egg was returned to its shrine, and there it would remain until the server's end. With the Ender Dragon defeated, the server would remain in its frantic early days for a while towns began to expand out and plan for the future. Players would claim huge chunks of land off the nether highways and set up shops, and overall, the server worked through playing early game Minecraft and began to settle down into stability. To mention one town specifically, Superiority began work on its massive town hall and started making plans for the city as a whole, shedding away its early housing for the city and replacing it with its pristine sculpted shine that the city is known for. On the 28th of August, Nowhere would annex other small nearby towns into its empire, the 2 towns being Stalltown and Novak. This didn't really change much of the server, as all it did was make the leaders of both towns, Aiden Swag and Sigma Turbine, council members of Nowhere, and granted what few citizens were in each town's access to Nowhere's farms, while also expanding Nowhere's territory. This did, however, cause a small border dispute between now Nowhere-owned Stalltown and Grogstown, as the 2 towns were founded near each other, which meant very little when both towns had a lax claiming system, but became an issue when Nowhere imposed a much larger claim size over Grogstown, a town that had no claim set up. This became an even bigger problem when Nowhere asked the Apocrypha Crusaders, a small group not associated with either town, situated on a mountain range between the 2, to stop building into Nowhere's claims. However, as the Crusaders would soon disappear on the server, never to be seen again, this never became an issue. Something to briefly mention at this point, despite the fact it had a large effect on the entire server as a whole, was the fact that 1.16 was home to the largest collection of map arts TGX had compared to any other reset. These would be constructed from the earliest days of the server with map arts like Swag, to some of its final days with map arts like Eternity. Most of these map arts were located in the map art conglomerate northwest of Spawn, located near the town of Novak. They would range in size and shape, but would typically only be a 1x1 piece. These massively scaled art pieces are a huge part of 1.16's history, culture, and style, and should be recognized for their historical importance. Going back to the early history of TG 1.16, it was on August 27th that player titaniumcow would write his manifesto, the TG Liberation Front, calling for anti-Bedrock player sentiment and discrimination between player bases. It is unknown how much this group would form, but noticeable Bedrock player Submadoge was executed via suffocation on the East Highway shortly after the book was released as a show of support for the TG Liberation Front. Moving through time a couple days later to September, there would be a much more active month on the server, as a wave of new players would join from r/teenagers from a viral post made by iiEthan about him meeting the Minecraft player with the username Sex on the r/teenagers server on September 7th. Sex was the player who joined for a short while, was given piles of good loot, was given a throne in nowhere, and left, never to be seen again. The appearance of Sex on TG heralded in a new wave of TG players that would help keep player numbers high in the early months of 1.16. September would also see construction begin on Marineford, a massive megastructure designed by Vanilla and Banana Pirate that we will discuss further once the construction had finalized. September 11th would see the launch of the TGN Archive project, an extension of the Discord server made by Wazado during TGN, led by Technogamer, a server where you can see every single TGN world preserved on one single server. This project was originally created as a solo project by Techno himself, but would later merge with the TGN Archive Discord upon learning the two projects had the exact same name and similar purpose. Ever since its launch, the TGN Archive now contains every single TGN world, TG world, and to date, one world from TGF, giving players the ability to see the entire history of TGX on one server. September 27th would see the marriage between CheesyBaconBits and Goatmere, a marriage that was never meant to be, as it was stopped by iiEthan and MarioFoli, who married each other instead. The marriage would end in a large brawl and grief outside the reception area, which would become the first wedding on 1.16 to end in some destruction, a pattern that would become more common later on. September was also the month where the Spirit City zoning issue happened, where a player named War Heroes had claimed land directly west of Spirit City, an area the town hadn't claimed, but War Heroes knew was an area the town wanted to expand into. War Heroes had claimed the land for his town, Texas Asia, but allegedly had no plans on making this a real town. Rather, he just wanted the land so that Spirit City would have to purchase Texas Asia for a sum of diamonds, or by giving War Heroes a membership slot on the Spirit City Council, much like how Nowhere had put the owners of the towns they had annexed a few weeks prior council member slots and positions of power within Nowhere. However, after much debate between War Heroes and the Spirit City leadership, War Heroes gave up the land and Spirit City would later expand into the area uncontested. Late September is also roughly around the time when Astral, later renamed to Astral 1, was finished. Astral 1 is a massive dome constructed by the Astral Group with a massive yin-yang floor. It is the first megastructure on TG 1.16 to have finished construction, and the dome became the iconic base for the Astral Group, containing one of the few world's end portals in its center. Around September 2020, the TG Minecraft team would begin releasing images of a new Minecraft server that was going to be released soon, showing images of volcanoes, mountains, and rockets. Unfortunately, all records of these images have been lost due to Vilhu, community director of r/teenagers, deleting the Discord channels they were posted in. After weeks of posting these images, finally, the TG Minecraft team would reveal some information about this new server. On October 3rd, 2020, the new server, dubbed TG Earth, was announced. It would be a PvP factions-based server with a map that is a 1:1000 scale of the Earth. The server would be run on 1.12, could be played on any version above it, and had 1.8 PvP. There was no nether or end, but resources from each dimension would be available in volcanoes for the nether, and the moon for the end, the moon being accessible via a rocket in Florida, Kazakhstan, or through a portal in Svalbard or Antarctica. The server had a job system where players could work to earn money, which they could spend on the auction house where players would sell items, or save up enough to found a faction, which they could expand with money. Factions could create warps that would allow them to teleport wherever they wanted across the world, as long as they owned the chunk, and could also ally or go to war against other factions. And of course, PvP toggle would not exist on this server. Everyone could be killed. You may be wondering, why was this server made? Why would the TG community be excited for this? Well, to keep it short, TG 1.16, like its predecessors, was a survival Minecraft server. The server only had a couple plugins for things like tree feller or /spawn and /home, but besides that, the server was completely vanilla. TG also had a very controversial feature implemented that had been in place since TG 1.15, called PvP Toggle. PvP Toggle was a feature where every single player had the option of being able to take or deal player damage, or not. All new players started with this enabled, unable to take damage, but could turn it off anytime they wanted. In theory, this would allow the people who wanted to fight the ability to fight, and those who didn't want to fight were kept out of it, and there would be a healthy split between both. However, this was not the case, as almost everyone had PvP Toggle enabled. The number of people who had it disabled was only in the dozens compared to the hundreds of people who had it enabled. This made many of those who had it disabled angry, as although they wanted to fight, there was very few people they could attack. This agitated many, as they wanted to be able to engage in PvP without hunting for someone, with whoever they find likely being stacked full of armor, making them a difficult opponent. Many in the community were also upset with the type of server TG was, with the community leaning more towards a town-based server where everyone lived in peace. There was also some demand by many to have a factions-based server, where all groups would be in competition with one another. Fortunately for them, the TG Minecraft team had a response. Immediately, there was a massive hype across the TG community for this new server. People began forming factions and claiming parts of the world weeks before the server even launched. Some of these factions would include the Superiority faction, the Soviet Republic of Texas, the Illinois Empire, Brazil, the Roman Empire, the Kalmar Union, the Kingdom of Missouri, French Kentucky, the Island Federation, dozens and dozens of factions that ranged from several members to only one. These factions forming and land calling lasted for days up until the day of the server's launch. Over a week later, on October 8th, a player named VTD would unveil a project he had been working on. A production called the TG Podcast. The TG Podcast was a show where VTD planned on interviewing players in the near future as podcasts and posting them to several websites, including YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcast, and Apple Podcasts. Logos for the show were designed by a player named Famskis. The Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcast, and Apple Podcast areas where the TG Podcast would be posted were maintained by ABlazingEBoy, who had also made a small website that directed listeners to all the places they could listen. Ninobf built a building designed to be both a bank and the TG Podcast offices in the heart of Superiority, and VTD ran the entire podcast itself and the YouTube channel, with a player named Yummy Pizza Guy making all the thumbnails for the videos. There were no podcast episodes in existence when the project was announced, but soon afterwards, the first podcast, an interview with moderator CheesyBaconBits, was recorded on October 10th and posted to YouTube on October 19th, with a video reenacting the interview in the TG Podcast office room being made to complement the video, with the footage taken and directed by VTD. VTD being played by Aiden Swag, and CheesyBaconBits being played by a player named Hypesy1, and the entire video being edited by a player named J-Man the Gamer. This podcast was dubbed Podcast Addict, and was the very first podcast in what is now a long line of TG podcasts. The first video garnered hundreds of views, amounting to almost 400 total views as of the time of writing the script, and was immensely popular among players. The TG Podcast as a production in its whole was renamed the TG Media on the 14th of October, right in between the recording and release of the first podcast, as VTD wanted to be able to make other forms of content outside of podcasts. You are currently watching this video on the TG Media channel, and as much as I'd love to get into how TG Media got here, we'll get more through that in this video. October 16th, 3 days before the release of Podcast Addict, 3 new players, DTI-131, Libby Jane, and Dude from Africa created a new town called Earn, located in between Grogstown, Seatown, and Treetown. Earn's existence immediately fell into question when a player named Oval Goat Kid had let the 3 know that Earn was founded on land he owned, but after that was settled, Earn began to grow into a large town. Sometime in October, the first Spawn billboard would also be built, where Submadoge would build a large billboard near the western border of Spawn facing east that said Grog on it. This billboard was created in the hopes that new players heading down the West Overworld Highway starting from Spawn would see that billboard and continue onward where more signs later down the highway would advertise the town he owned, Grogstown. Soon after this was built, another billboard would appear near the Grogstown billboard, showing what appeared to be a wooden house, the letter M, and an arrow pointing west. It is unknown who built this billboard and for what purpose. Soon after that billboard was built, a player named Archerhead would build another billboard that simply stated their name on the first block that players could build on the western spawn border. Soon after, a player named Mr. Cage would build his name on top of Archerhead's billboard in the same style. Afterwards, a player named Anchovy would do what Mr. Cage did, but on top of Cage's billboard. This would continue slowly over the entirety of 1.16's life, creating the megastructure known as the Wall of Players, what may be one of the largest in both size and player list community builds ever made. It towers from the ground to block height and includes 94 different names or words, although 13 are repeats. It was around October of 2020 that the Easy House would start to become a well-known meme on the server, a joke originating from Superiority, a town well known for its high build regulations that would often get the same design submitted from a popular online video of a Minecraft house tutorial from the YouTuber Cooopl. The video being entitled, Stylish and Compact Medieval House, Minecraft Tutorial. Despite the video's name, the type of design shown in the video is often called an easy house, in reference to the thumbnail of the video pointing to the house with the word easy written in large bold letters. The fact that so many people attempted to get into Superiority with this design, and the fact that the house in question can be found all over TG 1.16 in previous resets, led it to become infamous. This would lead the Easy House being recreated everywhere on the server, even actually being included in Superiority twice, one being a small building and another being much larger. The sequel town of Superiority on 1.17, Prosperity, would even have a mini-district dedicated to the Easy House. It is unknown when this build had started construction, as its creator had left before it could be finished, but it is believed that the Aperture's dodecahedron, a massive glass shape found thousands of blocks in the middle of nowhere on the server, began construction around this time. The dodecahedron is one of many megastructures on 1.16, and is renowned for its shape, massive size, and mystery over its creation. A couple of weeks later, on November 1st, Lemuria, a TG spin-off server created by former mod A3, launched. Shortly after, it would die, with a controversy surrounding the X-mod being one of the reasons for its failure. On November 4th, 2020, Sigma Turbine created an edited image of Soviet Union propaganda and changed it to be supporting the city of Superiority rather than Soviet Union, and posted it to the r/teenager server subreddit. Unbeknownst to Sigma, but she had unknowingly started an event known as the Propaganda Wars. 7 hours after Sigma's original post, Yummy Pizza Guy, council member of Spirit City, made a new propagandic image, this time supporting Spirit City, showing the leader of Spirit City, fun for the whole fam, standing over the broken shell of Superiority. This conflict between these two nations is not random, as Superiority and Spirit City were the two largest towns on the server at the time and had been competing over the largest town spot. Yummy would double down on these images, posting a second one claiming that Superiority eats babies. Sigma responded to these posts by creating yet another edited propaganda image supporting Superiority, and soon after, all hell had broken loose, as over a dozen more posts were all made from different towns and areas, including Grogstown, Seatown, and Orion, all making posts to join the war. The war would come to an end the next day, however, as on the 5th of November, a controversial player named Submadoge would endorse Spirit City in the propaganda wars, with his endorsement seen as an instant loss for Spirit City. November would also see the unveiling and release on the 21st of the mysterious second server the moderation team had alluded to when the hub world was released on day 1 of the server you get taken to when you walk left. TG Earth would launch to the public, with the announcement also being posted to r/teenagers, bringing in hundreds of more people to the server. Immediately, the hub world that connected both TG Survival and TG Earth lagged severely, and barely anyone was able to get into the server, with those who were often kicked. However, after initial hype died down and the server began to stabilize, the first few factions were founded. Within hours, the first few factions began to rise, most of which being pre-existing communities founded by TG Survival members, rather than from new players from r/teenagers. The main four were the Soviet Republic of Texas, founded near Houston, Texas, Illinois, founded near Central Illinois, the Kalmar Union, located on the island of Svalbard, and the Superiority faction, which was created in Istanbul, Turkey. The next day also saw the founding of Brazil, founded in Neapolis, Sergipe. Back to the server's launch on November 21st, however, also saw the founding of World Police, a faction not formed by members of TG Survival or members of r/teenagers, but members of a completely different Minecraft Earth server, SMP Earth. This group did have a main base on TG Earth, like every other faction had, located in Hokkaido, Japan. But World Police differed from the rest, as they also had several small bases located outside every other large faction base, used for the sole purpose of raiding the opposing bases they are stationed next to, a popular strategy used on SMP Earth. World Police was able to use the Dynamap to find any locations on the map inhabited by players and would grief it. Within days, World Police had complete control over the server, hunting both new players who had just joined to bombarding heavily fortified bases run by the largest groups. World Police had TG Earth in an iron fist, and was not keen on letting go. However, it was discovered that many, if not most of the members of World Police had been hacking, using cheats that would enable them to walk on water among others. Shortly after this was discovered, on November 23rd, 2020, most of World Police had been banned from the server. Afterwards, the remaining members of World Police began to dox members of the TG moderation team, leading to the entire faction being banned. This would end the World Police conflicts, an unceremonious end to TG Earth's strongest faction who had once ruled the world. With World Police gone, one may presume that an era of peace would befall TG Earth, the members of the server thankful of their newfound liberty, free of the clutches of World Police, especially so on the infamous day of Thanksgiving. And you would be horribly wrong. On November 25th, 2020, a day before Thanksgiving, two representatives of Brazil, Aiden Swag and Sokane, traveled to Alaska to declare war. Unfortunately, the two became separated and were attacked by a player named Loomisfire, who represented the Texas faction. Aiden was able to defeat Loomis, and was successfully able to reach Alaska, declaring war. However, upon declaring war, Brazil discovered that Alaska was allied with Texas, effectively declaring war on Texas itself. Brazil ended the war upon discovering this, but was still attacked by Texas by Loomisfire, and later a large Texan army. In response, the next day on Thanksgiving, members of Brazil, the Kalmar Union, and Superiority, now allied with Brazil, raided Texas with invisibility potions, leading to some fighting. The initial battle in Texas was much more underwhelming than first planned by the allied factions, as most of Texas did not log on due to the plans of the raid being leaked. After this initial battle, however, Texas would return, fighting back hard against the allied forces, especially against Brazil. The fighting, now dubbed the Thanksgiving War, came to an end when Texas signed a treaty with Superiority on December 1st, 2020, stating that they would not make a warp near the Superiority faction that would enable them to easily raid Superiority. All factions backed down in response, and peace was achieved. Fighting died down, and the powerful factions of the server began to bunker down and stayed non-aggressive. TG Earth would remain this way for a while. Well, at least a couple days. Soon following the Thanksgiving War, Texas would launch a massive raid on a small faction of Madagascar, a faction made up entirely of refugees of those attempting to leave the spawn in Africa. After two consecutive raids on the 25th and 28th, Madagascar would collapse, with those who survived fleeing to the faraway faction of the Kalmar Union for safety. Upon reaching Kalmar, however, the Madagascarians would soon find themselves in the same predicament, as Kalmar was also being raided by Texas. After a failed defense against the Texans and new refugees causing issues for the faction, the Kalmar Union would, in practice, collapse. The faction still remained in name, but it was sparsely occupied and served as nothing more than a name for its future. Heading into December, Ninobf, owner of Superiority, would take a break from the server, entrusting Superiority Council member Murdock Redocchi to lead the town in his absence. Despite how small of a change this may seem, Nino's absence would cause a large stagnation on the server, as without his leadership to start work on many large projects, many TG members had nothing to do on the server. Knowing this, the month of December would see slower activity on the server. Despite this, December happened to be a very eventful month for the town of Ern. December 13th, 2020, a faction in Ireland called the IRA was founded by player GeneticEmu and would begin to grow into a larger faction at the time. Not long after, Texas would create a warp near the faction of Superiority, in direct violation of the treaty signed after the Thanksgiving War. In response, Superiority would form the Coalition, a group made up of Superiority, the IRA, the Kalmar Union, Brazil, and Illinois, with the entire group declaring war on Texas. This new war, dubbed World War II, with the Thanksgiving War being redubbed to World War I, ended after some fighting and the fall of Texas. With the fall of Texas, TG Earth would once again experience an era of peace on the server. Again, for only a couple weeks. December would see the dramatic culmination of the effects of Dude from Africa's reign over Earn, leading to Earn claiming several cities, such as the newly created Bacon Town. Bacon Town was a town constructed far east of Spawn in November, founded by players CheesyBaconBits and JuiceBoy 2005, naming the town Bacon Juice Town. However, as JuiceBoy would become inactive, the town was renamed to simply Bacon Town, with CheesyBaconBits as the sole owner. With Bacon Town becoming a vast, growing, up-and-coming town, Dude from Africa would approach Bacon Town with a deal, that Earn would give Bacon Town items in a farm, and in exchange, Bacon Town would become annexed by Earn. CheesyBaconBits agreed. During Dude from Africa's time in November, and more so in December, he would implement many rules over Earn that did not seem enforceable and seemed strange to many, such as each house in Earn requiring a flag to be flown, or a tax placed on all citizens. Dude from Africa had also attempted to annex another town, a town that had the opposite story to Bacon Town, Tree Town. Tree Town was once a large and active town in the first few days of the server's life, but with Tree Town's leader disappeared, many believed that Tree Town was fair game. After annexing Tree Town, two towns had suddenly and unexpectedly declared war on Earn, Seatown and Grogstown. Seatown had declared war on Earn as they were angry at Dude from Africa and wanted to hurt the nation in response. Grogstown had declared war for two different reasons, the first of which being that Grogstown was allied with Seatown and was forced into declaring war against Earn when Seatown did so. Ignoring this, Grogstown was actually coincidentally in the middle of a discussion discussing the possibility of war with Earn over the annexation of Treetown, as Grogstown had wanted to annex the town first, which was being discussed when Seatown declared war. Seatown and Grogstown, seeing as both nations had declared war and a pre-existing alliance existed between the two that was forged in the first few weeks of the server's life, decided to form a new alliance for the purpose of this war, dubbed the Fuck Earn Alliance, or FEA. This war between the FEA and Earn would later be dubbed World War Earn. 2 days after the double declaration of war, the first battle would be fought over Discord on December 17th, as Bacon Town had to create a Discord server for the town. As the creator of the Discord server did not have any restrictions or rules set in place, when the server accidentally leaked, it was flooded with other unrelated TG players. Banana Pirate 1, leader of Seatown, took this opportunity to use the @everyone command to declare that he was the rightful ruler of Bacon Town, and his second command declared Bacon Town was independent from Earn. However, Banana's reign would be short-lived, as HypeC1 would use @everyone to declare himself the rightful ruler of Bacon Town, overthrowing Banana. HypeC would rename the town to HypeC's Gaming Lounge, but soon after, Bacon Town administrators were able to regain control of the Discord server. Despite Bacon Town taking control back of the Discord server, the FEA, which now included HypeC despite him not being associated with either Grogstown or Seatown, hatched a plan to overthrow CheesyBaconBits and instate HypeC as the true leader of Bacon Town. The plan went as follows. Submadoge, leader of Grogstown, me, would design a 1 pixel to 1 block ratio statue of HypeC wearing a crown on a large base. This statue would be built in-game in the middle of Bacon Town by HypeC. As the center of Bacon Town has a giant statue of HypeC with a crown on it, it must be assumed that HypeC is the owner of the town. The plan went perfectly according to plan, but shockingly, the people of Bacon Town did not reject the statue, and instead, they embraced it. Although HypeC had no real power, and Cheesy remained the real leader of Bacon Town, HypeC became a pseudo-leader of the town after the statue was built. The combination of both events were seen as a devastating loss to Earn in the war, and trust in the leadership of Dude from Africa continued to fall. For his massive overreaches as council member, Dude from Africa was stripped both of his rank and banished from Urn by TTI. On December 22nd, 2020, a small celebration was held for the 1-year anniversary of TG, where a group of TG players played in a large group on Hypixel, playing a few games in commemoration. On Christmas Day, Astral would finish their 6-day work on their new megastructure, Astral's Atlas, a giant ice statue depicting the Greek titan Atlas holding up the Minecraft world. Atlas is well renowned not only for being an incredible build, but one that was done in a very short period of time, and is another one of the list of 1.16's megastructures. Late December and early January would start to see a trend in the community surrounding an animated character from the 2006 family comedy Open Season, Boog. A gif of the character shaking his behind towards the camera became incredibly popular quickly over this time, leading to a ban on the gif and the character on TeenSerf. This strengthened his popularity, and the character remained an important cultural icon on the server, especially when the Minecraft player with the username Boog joined the server. Late December and early January would also see the creation and founding of the VIP Club, an auction house, apartment complex, casino, chessboard, and many other things, created and led by Whatnot. Whatnot would lead large auctions, selling a variety of items put up for sale by a collection of players and bought by a large audience. The VIP Club was owned by Whatnot, but had managers who also owned and ran sections of the club, like Seedling and Hilton, who owned the Shroom section of the club. The VIP Club would also run events like PvP and chess championships. After the end of World War II and the fall of Texas, the coalition would fall apart, and now with faction superiority in Illinois no longer an alliance, Illinois would declare war on superiority. Not much is said to have actually come out of the war, but months later superiority had occupied Illinois for a period of time, officially ending the war and spelling the end for Illinois. It is also within this period of time that Brazil would suddenly collapse and become abandoned. Heading into the new year in January of 2021, January 8th would see the launch of Teenagers Gaming, a subreddit dedicated to r/teenagers and gaming, technically related to TG. The opening of this server was seen as a rival to the player-made and run r/teenagers server that was dedicated to the TG server. As of writing this, r/teenagers gaming has been privated and cannot be accessed, while r/teenagers server remains open. On January 17th, a few days later, Kero, community director of r/teenagers, the parent subreddit that owns TG, resigned from her position, passing it on to ex-Discord moderator, Vilhu. Kero was well known on TG mainly for her involvement in Modgate in TGN 1.13, and her controversial decision to sever TGN's connection to r/teenagers. She is also known for helping create TG as a replacement to TGN. With the announcement of her resignation, many older TGN players would come back to TG to check out what had transpired since they had last been on TGN, which for many was back when TGN was shut down in the first place, which had been over a year and a half prior. Speaking of TGN, January also saw the launch of the split-off server Ascendancy. Ascendancy was a split-off of TGN led by player Connor7000 that was, according to Ascendancy themselves, a Minecraft civilization project. Our ultimate goal is to host a feedback-driven and feature-full socio-political Minecraft server with custom topography that revolves around geopolitics and promotes a sense of wonder and adventure. Unfortunately, Ascendancy was unable to garner much of an audience, and would close a month later. Back on TG, January 11th was a day that was very uneventful. Anyways, January also saw the release of the first chapter of TG High on January 25th, 2021. A literary serial released on the r/teenagers subreddit, a fanfic about popular TG players as high school students in a school known as TG High, written by players AncientBlade, titaniumcow, and Hajor. The first chapter, released the 21st of January, would be immensely successful, and would become one of, if not the only, majorly known fanfiction on the server. Over the course of the next 7 months, 8 chapters would be released, with the series ending July 16th, 2021. The fanfiction would win an award a few days after this chapter was published at the Swag Awards. A few days later, on February 5th, 2021, would be Hypesy and Cheese Addict's wedding. This wedding was odd, as it seemed to have been planned out and started by Hypsy on a whim, and he did not consult Cheese about the fact that Hypsy was planning on marrying him out of nowhere. Cheese objected to the wedding when he found out, but Hypsy decided to have the wedding anyways. The wedding was originally set to take place in Bacontown, but was changed to the large structure known as Famsky's Cathedral, with the reception taking place in Bacontown. The day of the wedding, Cheese Addict did not show up, so as a replacement, Sigma Turbine, dressed as Cheese Addict, stood in for Cheese at the wedding. As the two were in the midst of being wed by fellow TG moderator Daskipper, Cheese Addict himself would crash the wedding, teleporting several blocks of TNT on top of the new couple. After the attack, however, the wedding continued as normal, and the guests would move to Bacontown for the reception, deciding to take to the crown of Hypsy's statue to celebrate. After some rejoicing, players would start to bomb and destroy the statue, and then Bacontown itself. However, despite all the griefing, moderators would fix the entire town, not banning anyone for griefing. This would set a standard on TG that would last for months, that griefing is legal on the server as long as you have a wedding. This would start a number of weddings on the server that would almost always end in destruction, giving weddings a more sinister connotation than they would typically have. A couple days later, on February 10th, VTD would step down as owner of TG Media. At the time, VTD had not released a new video in 2 months and no longer wanted to run the channel. VTD would pass ownership over to Hypsy, who would help release Pod for the Whole Cast, a podcast with fun for the whole fam that had been recorded by VTD 2 months prior and had yet to be released. Under new leadership, Hypsy began to look for new hosts for the podcast to make new podcasts for TG Media, and acquired a collection of players to do so. The first episode of these new podcasts were hosted by players Son of Demise and Submadoge, with extra hosts including Lousy Smousy and Bubby later on, with guest Murdock Redocchi. The new host implemented a different style of podcast, asking more questions than VTD, going into more rants more often, and overall implementing a much longer style of podcast than had previously been done. This first podcast, named Murdock and the Communist Cicadas, a naming scheme that also differed from before, became the second most viewed podcast on the entire channel, just under the first ever released Podcast Addict, and would later win an award for being the best podcast ever released months later. TG Media would continue making more podcasts with a rotating cast of hosts. Over the course of the rest of 1.16 under Hypsy, TG Media would make a larger variety of content, including ABlazingEReads, where moderator ABlazingEBoy read fanfics, which only ended up having 1 episode, and TG Tricks, a couple quick tutorial videos on how to perform tricks using TG's plugins, hosted by VTD. On February 11th, a player named Floor Tentacle would found the town of Tentacle Town, a town on the basis of providing shelter to those on a server where it can be hard for new players to become assimilated. Despite how late the town was founded, Tentacle Town became quite a decently sized town over the course of 1.16, making it one of the most active towns in late 1.16. A little over a week later was the Valentine's Day event on February 14th, a short event where moderators built a large structure where you can play a variety of games. This was advertised on r/teenagers, leading to a high player turnout. Not long after the war declaration with Illinois, however, the massive faction of Superiority who claimed dominance over the server had gone inactive, along with Illinois. This was mainly due to the leader of the Superiority faction, Ninobf, going inactive, taking a break from TG in general. Without the cruel steel fist of Superiority, TG Earth was allowed to breathe, allowing new factions to pop up around the server. These factions, new and old, formed together to create the United Minecraft Nations, a group dedicated to connecting the factions around the world and maintaining peace among nations. This group was made up of almost every major and minor faction on the server, including the Kalmar Union, Congo, the Russian Empire, New Obomnium, the IRA, the NCR, Newfoundland, Catalonia, Serbia, Shrexland, and the VOC. However, unbeknownst to the group, the Kalmar Union was only in the group for the sole purpose of spying on them, for the good of the Superiority faction. Besides this, however, once again, peace remained on TG Earth. And this time, it would last maybe a little longer. A few days later, on February 17th, World War Earn had its next event with the Grogstown Raid on Earn. 2 members of the FEA, using a large incomplete tunnel system built between Grogstown and Earn, raided DTI's castle, stealing a flag and tilting his maps in his map room before escaping. The entrances to this tunnel was hidden in all 3 locations, with the Earn location leading to a home in Earn called Hypesies Gaming Lounge, a reference to Hypesies' takeover of Bacontown. This tunnel would also eventually connect to a town called Gamer City, a plan for a pseudo-town made by the FEA that looked enticing enough that dude from Africa would annex it, leading to FEA members having power in Earn's government. However, this plan never ended up happening, and the tunnel was not extended. The tunnel, however, shortly after it was completed, was discovered by DTI, leader of Earn, who had made an X-ray pack to make all blocks disappear except the ones that made up the tunnel. This led to a man-made cave-in being made in the tunnel to block Earn's access to it. In response, DTI would build a new tunnel that accomplished the same goal. In response to this devastating loss, the FEA looked for new members in other towns, first asking Bacontown, who is owned by Earn, to join the FEA. CheesyBaconBits, leader of Bacontown, agreed to join the FEA, severing their connection to Earn and becoming fully independent, something that was supported by false Earn leader, Dude from Africa, who had no power over the decision, and was not supported by Earn's real leader, DTI 131, who continued to claim that Bacontown was still under the control of Earn. The FEA would also ask Spirit City to join the conflict, something that Fun for the Whole Fam, leader of Spirit City, would also agree to. Superiority was also asked to join the conflict, but the invitation was rejected. Despite this rejection, with Bacontown and Spirit City, the FEA was strengthened. However, a more real threat began to emerge, as on February 23rd, the same day the tunnel was discovered and Bacontown joined the FEA, the server would suddenly shut down. No one on the server knew why until the person responsible revealed themselves, someone named Whipper. Whipper was someone who had a strong disdain for the r/teenagers subreddit and disliked the TG administrator Muzak23. To fight back against the things they hated, Whipper DDoSed TG. For those who don't know, DDoSing, or a distributed denial of service attack, is an attack where a computer, or multiple, tried to connect to a server so fast that the server can no longer keep up, resulting in it rejecting all connections and kicking actual users out. Whipper had started these attacks sometime after he had joined TG, when he had immediately began griefing Earn, something that got him very quickly banned. Whipper recorded these griefs in a sped-up video of him griefing and getting banned, in a video entitled The Fall of r/Teenagers Minecraft Server, ending the video with the line, "This is only the beginning. It will only get worse from here. Wakey face." This video would be posted to his YouTube channel, but unfortunately, the video has gone down. Whipper would continue to DDoS the server for months, repeatedly slowing down the server and shutting it down. Around these attacks, Whipper would join TG on alternate accounts, identifying themselves to be instantly banned. This led to a trend on TG where every new player was greeted with the phrase, "Hi Whipper," or a variation of it, accusing them of being a Whipper alt. To this day, many unknown or new accounts are identified by players as being Whipper alts, despite the fact that Whipper has not been active on the server for many months. Whipper would post a second video entitled "Living Rent-Free in r/Teenager's Head" that highlighted that Whipper would continue to DDoS the server. This video is also gone from YouTube. On March 15th, Ninobf would return to TG from his extended break, and a few days later, would resume control of Superiority again. Nino's return brought a new wave of activity to the server, and things remained very peaceful on TG Survival. I hope it's also peaceful over on TG Earth. Back from the dead, Ninobf, leader of the Superiority faction, had returned to TG Earth, and with him, he brought the full might of Superiority. On the 16th of March, attacking at random, Superiority raided several factions part of the United Minecraft Nations, including New Obomnium, Serbia, and the VOC. Learning of the dangers of Superiority, the UMN hosted a meeting in Newfoundland to discuss the conflict, eventually declaring war on Superiority. Not soon after, Superiority was able to raid and completely occupy Newfoundland, shutting down the island from anyone who wanted to enter. Over the course of days, each faction part of the UMN was heavily raided or occupied. Fearing for their lives, the UMN had come up with a plan to build a bunker in the Pacific Ocean to bunker down and hide from superiority. This bunker, built out of stone and granite, named Zion, did not last long. As soon, superiority was able to quickly find and destroy the bunker, killing everyone inside. Retreating from yet another loss, the UMN created a new bunker named Perseverance off the coast of Japan that was much stronger than the previous bunker, made out of 2 layers of obsidian. Shortly after its construction, the UMN would launch a force into superiority-occupied Newfoundland in a battle known as the Battle of Newfoundland. The battle was over in a minute, as superiority slaughtered the opposing force in seconds. Only 1 soldier was able to make it back to Perseverance. After several unsuccessful raids, superiority was finally able to break into the Perseverance bunker and once again massacred the UMN members inside. This would be the last battle of the war, as on March 29th, 2021, 12 days after the start of the war, the UMN was defeated by superiority. The UMN Superiority War would be the final major war fought on TG Earth, and would cement superiority as the dominant faction on the server, from the day World Police fell to the day the server was shut down. The UMN would collapse after its loss, but would later be reorganized into the UMN Remnant, led by LysFisk, who would continue raids on superiority. Unfortunately for the Remnant, however, superiority would remain unflinching for the rest of the server's life. For 4 more months, TG Earth would remain open, but due to low player counts and diminishing player interest, the server would eventually shut down on July 19th, 2021, alongside its sister server, TG Survival 1.16. In the waning days of TG Earth after the UMN Superiority War, TG Earth would have very low player counts, barely staying above 0 on most days. The large size of the map, matched with the lack of significant community built around the server due to the sheer power of both the World Police within the first few days of the server and the superiority faction later in the server's life, made for too big of a wall to break through when it came to forming a solid server. Unfortunately, no official TG Earth successor had ever been made, though a monument to it was built on TG Survival 1.17, named Orbis, constructed by LysFisk, and a spin-off server to TG Earth was created by TG Earth player Theno. Despite this all, dozens if not hundreds of players who played on TG Earth continue to have fond memories of the server and sing its praises to this day. Despite it all, TG Earth did have many things to praise. The many wars and factions of the server made it by far one of the most different and unique official TGX servers launched in its history. It was the most well thought out and properly executed response to the controversy surrounding PvP toggle and the more violent urges of the TG community, and as a player of it, I can say it was pretty damn fun. This has been Submadoge with the history of TGX, and I hope you can now say you now know the story of TG Earth. On March 24th, Marineford, a massive megastructure constructed by K Vanilla and Banana Pirate with help from Nikos and Emerald Babakin, would be completed. The structure consists of a giant crescent stone island with a giant Japanese-style fortress on top, with Japanese iconography meaning Marines, based on the Marine headquarters from the anime One Piece. Marineford is one of the few megastructures on 1.16 not constructed by the Astral Group, and Marineford is one of the largest builds ever built on TGX. A few weeks later, on March 31st, 2021, members of both EARN and the FEA would come to an agreement on how to end the war, with 3 duels that would take place between EARN and FEA members. Whichever side won the most duels won the war. The first battle was between players Stupidly Rice of the FEA and Libby Jane of EARN. Rice won the battle, giving the points in the end to the FEA. The second duel was between Hypesy of the FEA and DTI-131 of EARN. DTI won the duel, giving a point to EARN. The final duel between Dank of the FEA and II Nanny of EARN was scheduled, but was delayed, and would continue to be delayed for some time, leaving the winner of the war currently unknown. A day later, on April 1st, the server would shut down, being replaced with the April Fool's server, referred to by moderators as Catgirl Anarchy, and also referred to by players as Catboy Hell. Moderators claimed that the reason why this happened was due to Whipper's DDoSing attacks, deleting the world data of 1.16, forcing the moderators to make a new server on a smaller world. On this server, griefing was legal. PvP toggle was removed, and all messages and text were translated into uwu speak. New commands were also available on the server, including the ability to purr and hiss, and the ability to love bite and pet other players. The event lasted for 3 days, and several towns were formed, including Cilantro, the sequel to Superiority, YesVac, the successor to Novac, and Swagsville, the sequel to Bacontown. After the 3 days, 1.16 went back up as usual, and the April Fool's server was moved from the 1.16 server area in the hub to the event server area, continuing for another week before shutting down. April would also see the release of Foley Client, the name of what was originally a joke about a hack client named after TG moderator MarioFoli that did not exist, later made into a real client made up of mods that could actually be used on TG, like Lightmatica, Fancy Menu, Boosted Brightness, and Voxel Maps, all coded by TG moderator ABlazingEBoy. A month later, on May 13th, player bluspectator began the release of his album Experiments 1 through 16. Experiments 1 through 16 is an orchestral album composed entirely by bluspectator, with pieces based on different locations on TG 1.16, from Spawn, to Urn, to Grogstown, to Superiority, and many, many more. Throughout this video, you have likely been listening to the music of bluspectator and his album Experiments 1 through 16. Experiments 1 through 16, along with bluspectator's other album released on 1.16, Talk Outro, have been widely praised on the server and continue to be heard to this day. Felted, a song composed based around the 1.16 spawn and its music video that was rendered by Technigamer and edited by cfdlboi, was the highest viewed video on the TG Media channel for several months. On April 19th, members from the Newfoundland faction on TG Earth decided to make a town on TG Survival 1.16 named St. John's. The town was led by a player named HexdePixel and was able to get quite large in a short amount of time, leading to several successor towns later in TGX. On April 28th, another spin-off server of TG would launch called Roberblock, made by players Salat and Son of Demise. The server would be a skyblock world, and after a few days of high player activity where many stone structures were made, the server would shut down due to a lack of player interest. A couple days later, on May 19th, the Bacon Hole was finished, a giant hole that contained 239 destroyed chunks, containing the largest creeper farm on the server. Led by iiEthan, the process of making such a large hole gave him carpal tunnel from hand mining, as well as putting him in a massive amount of debt, as Plastic would have to pay many players diamonds to destroy chunks as a part of the Bacon Hole project. Diamonds Plastic didn't entirely have. Despite this, the Bacon Hole was created without issue and would help Bacontown with all of their gunpowder needs, something they would need soon in the future. On May 23rd, Murdock's Arch, after many setbacks and hiatuses, finished construction. A giant megastructure of a huge stone arch, Murdock's Arch towers over the nearby jungle it's set in. 8 stone faces of bearded men staring off into the distance. The building is located near Superiority and the small town of Belgrade. The arch was originally designed to be a small part of a much larger build, but this larger build was never made, opting instead to construct this smaller part and giving us what we have on the server. Another month later, on June 2nd, World War Urn would finally come to its conclusion. Dank of the FEA and Nanny of Urn would duel, with Nanny winning the fight and winning Urn the war. After 7 months of fighting, Urn was able to overcome the overwhelming odds and win the fight. Unfortunately for Urn, in the middle of the war that was being fought over ownership of Treetown, Stone Canoe, owner of Treetown, returned to the server after months of absence and retook the town, meaning Urn had nothing to gain from the war. The war officially came to an end June 3rd, 2021, when Submadoge, leader of Grogstown, gave DTI, owner of Urn, the Shield of Grogstown, bearing a large Grogstown flag. This symbolic gesture became the last official act of the war. Soon following the war, Grogstown would build a chain of bars down the West Highway, and on the bar bordering the urn portal, the flag stolen from urn would be placed 1 block away from the urn claim, leaving it incredibly close to the urn claim, but still within Grogstown's borders. Soon after the end of World War Urn, DTI would give the leaders of the FEA councilship of Urn, allowing them to do whatever they wanted in Urn, which started a large-scale project that was never finished, where one of Urn's coasts, the one bordering Grogstown, was partially drained and filled with lava. DTI, in retaliation, would build easy houses on top of the lava to block it out. On June 5th, TG moderator iiEthan would post a video, Ben Shapiro playing on the r/teenagers Minecraft server? Real, on the r/teenagers subreddit. This post would get over 25,000 upvotes and would bring in yet another new wave of players to the server. On June 15th, player titaniumcow would form a criminal organization known as the Garfield Cartel. The Garfield Cartel was well known for selling many illegal items, such as drugs and illegal map arts that depicted content deemed inappropriate for TG. The cartel would take control of the Tunnel, the ex-World War Urn project, and turn it into drug tunnels where they can produce and sell their items, including a weed greenhouse under Urn, an alcohol brewery inside a ship in Seatown, and a map copying center full of illegal map arts under the Superiority Library. The cartel's main base was underneath Grogstown, where the cartel stored all of their stock and profits, as well as producing cocaine. Sometime prior to June, the two cryptocurrencies, Dead Bush and Fern, would be created by Hypesy1 and VTD respectively, Hypesy creating Dead Bush before Fern. Neither of these currencies replaced the more respected diamonds or netherite, but were sometimes used in rare cases to make transactions. This process would practically end by 1.17. The next month, in July 2021, it was announced that TG 1.16 would close down on July 19th, with TG 1.16 being replaced by TG 1.17, and TG Earth being shut down permanently. On July 13th, 2021, TG made the controversial change to move the physical server where the server is hosted from the United States to Germany, halfway across the globe. The reason why Community Director of r/teenagers, Vilhu, did this was due to the fact that the European Union had better privacy laws, lower costs, better hardware, and other unknown factors. Despite this change was disliked by many in the community, as the server move benefited the minority of European players, while detrimenting the majority of North American players. Many also believe that Vilhu was lying about the effectiveness of the new server, believing that the old server was better. A few days before the end of the server, titaniumcow betrayed the Garfield Cartel and stole the entire organization's profits it had earned throughout its entire life before disappearing. In preparation for Anarchy, both TG players Son of Demise and Submadoge would host an event in the last few hours of the server's life, the TG Tour and the Swag Awards. The TG Tour took up most of the event, where both Submadoge and Son of Demise toured the server. The Swag Awards was an event that was hosted by both Demise and Subma, who handed out awards to those who had won them based on the award's title and by popular player vote. The stream where this was originally filmed had dozens of viewers and was likely one of, if not the largest streams in TGX history. With the end of the server came the end of the tour, and 1.16 finally came to an end. Afterwards came the 1.16 Anarchy, where all rules were gone and griefing and PvP were both allowed. In preparation for this event, Superiority built a giant redstone machine south of Superiority that would completely drown the city in 74 million blocks of water, or 0.1% of the entire overworld, preserving the city from griefs. The Astral group, on the other hand, really wanted to grief Superiority, so Astral had painstakingly removed all of the water from Superiority so it could be griefed, which it was, heavily. Instead of attempting to preserve the town, Bacon Town attempted to erase it off the map, creating the Bacon Cube. The Bacon Cube was a giant 50 by 50 cube of TNT placed underneath Bacon Town, made up of 125,000 blocks of TNT, or almost 2,000 stacks of TNT. The project was originally created by cfdlboi, but was later led by iiEthan. On the day of Anarchy, the detonation of the bomb shut the server down 4 times, leaving the server admin Muzak needing to remove parts of the bomb from existence to help stop it from exploding to stop it from shutting down the server. However, although the bomb was massive and shut down the server several times, the bomb ended up not doing much damage to Bacon Town as a whole. Every other major town was heavily griefed during Anarchy. Urn, Grogstown, Seatown, Nowhere, Modville, Tentacle Town, Savargentina, the Shire, Novak, and dozens more were all very damaged by Anarchy. Many players hid in bunkers underground, keeping inside them their items and other prized possessions safe to avoid losing it to Anarchy. But then, as announced, after several days of Anarchy, TG 1.16 was shut down forever. A few days later, 1.17 would launch, and the server would continue on. Until it didn't.